from mother to birthday person, right? That's where their priorities are. A few years ago, there was a resolution that was floated about let's focus and redoubling on student achievement and success. That was actually withdrawn. That was voted down. That is not their priority whatsoever. You think about during COVID, what the AFT working hand in glove with the CDC to keep schools closed. The teachers union in California, their list of reopening demands was universal health care, moratorium on charter schools. I mean, this had nothing to do with children's safety, achievement, learning loss. This was all about them and their money or power. Chicago's teachers union said that the push to reopen schools was rooted in racism, sexism, and misogyny, right? The teachers union of Los Angeles president said that there is no such thing as learning loss. Our babies learn resiliency. Well, the NAEP scores that came out, and have been coming out since September, are astonishing. And let's remember, even before COVID, education was not in great shape before. Our kids were not this is not a world-class education that most children in America are receiving. So those are the unions, right? We all know the unions are bad guys. And my first job in Washington, I worked on school choice issues. I always knew the unions were bad, but since I started working on PE, what was really astonishing to me is, oh my gosh, there are so many more bad guys out there. The next one, one that has been in the news a lot recently, is professional associations. Some of you may remember back in November 2021, the National School Board Association sending a letter to the Biden administration requesting federal intervention in school board issues because, again, parents were speaking up, they were speaking out, and that was a bad thing. The Biden administration turned around 4 days later, lightning speed in Washington, if any of you have gone to Washington, right? And they had this memo directing federal involvement in all of these issues, right? They wanted the U.S. attorneys to work together. This was really, it was intended to and had the effect of chilling parents because no one really wants to knock at the door from the FBI, not even me and Ed. And so that was something that was astonishing. But then you think it's not just this national association that really has since collapsed in the wake of this scandal. The state associations were deeply involved. The California Teachers State Board of Education or California State School Board Association sent their own letter to the Biden administration saying, hey, we really want this. So did the Massachusetts one. And even in red states, in Texas, the Texas School Boards Association has put out guidance for all of their state school boards or for all the local school boards in Texas, telling them to have what we call parental exclusion policy, saying the parents don't have a right to know the gender of their child at school. Same thing in Idaho. You think you live in a red state, everything is fine. It is absolutely not fine. And that's something that is really worth keeping an eye on. But it's not just the NSBA. The National Association of Secondary School Principals sent a letter to the Biden administration 2 weeks before in mid-September 2021, asking the same thing. The American Association of Superintendents, same thing. The guidance counselors, the school psychologists, they have all been pushing all of these secret gender things, the bias walks, the implicit privilege, the implicit bias and the privilege walks and all of these issues as well for many, many years. The one organization that I kind of expected to be standing on thwart history yelling stop on some of the pronoun stuff would have been the English teachers, right? But no, like we found in 2018, they put out a memo saying that you should be using they, them pronouns and we need to respect your children. This is way before COVID, right? And so, and again, all these teachers with their salaries, sometimes they have their school district, these are your tax dollars that are going to pay these dues of these associations. And so your money is being weaponized against you in more ways than one, which is frightening. There is also the consultant class. We see all of these districts that are starting to hire equity consultants. They'll come in, they'll do an equity audit for you. My father was Buddhist, and at least with Buddhism, you can achieve nirvana. With the equity consultants, you can never achieve nirvana, right? The solution is always keep paying, but you're never good enough. And so that's something that is also kind of astonishing me. This feels like it's the modern day equivalent of selling indulgences. You're just kind of trying to buy a little bit of peace. But they're pushing policies like racially segregated affinity groups, which are policies we've challenged in court. You think back to 1951, we used to say that it was a bad thing to segregate people on the basis of race in America. We now have people going into our schools, charging districts $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 saying, well, absolutely, you would have to have your children in different rooms being taught by teachers of different races. I beg your pardon, what? I mean, it's astonishing that that's happening. Colorblindness is an evil thing. Our districts are paying for the privilege of being told to engage in unconstitutional behavior. That's a slap in the face to all of us. There are also, number 4, nonprofits, all these different organizations that are floating around pushing these. Many of you who work in school boards, in the education space, when you have a meeting, when you have something that comes up that might be semi-controversial, the room is flooded with activists. These are not just necessarily grassroots activists. These are people that have been pushed there by organizations like GLSEN or the Trevor Project or Black Lives Matter in School. Many of our school districts are pushing Black Lives Matter in School curriculum in particular. And this is not really, benign, let's teach Black History Month. These are really awful things about the destruction of the nuclear family. And so, again, these are activist organizations that are on the ground pushing these policies, creating their own little echo chamber, not really speaking for what the majority of parents want. There is, as California, I think you guys are kind of ground zero for this, the liberated ethnic studies model that is being pushed in the halls of your state legislature, where again, we need to children need to be taught to see themselves and each other on the basis of skin color first and foremost. And we need to break out and pit these groups against each other. This group is oppressed and that group was oppressed and this group was oppressed. But then also, as much as we hear from people like Randy Barnard teaching true history, there are weird parts that are left out. The Minnesota version, the first iteration of their ethnic studies curriculum that was put forward last year, didn't have a mention of the Holocaust in their World War II. What's this about teaching true history, you say? And then, I guess my favorite nonprofit, because they talk about me a lot, is the Southern Poverty Law Center. I am a hate group. I guess many of you are as well, since you're all education activists. But they also, funny enough, make a lot of money in this space. They have their own curriculum called Teaching Tolerance. Isn't that weird that they are attacking people who don't like what they're doing and then they're selling and giving out stuff with the other? Oh, strange. The Southern Poverty Law Center, as a side note, has $700 million. They have $150 million in an offshore bank account. So, for them to pretend that they represent, the grassroots demands of teachers is absolutely, that's bogus. That's more, for them to have more money than the teachers unions blows my mind. Number 5, foundations. We get questions from a lot of times, where is this stuff coming from? Who is funding this? There are major foundations out there. There are Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, the Gates Foundation. The Gates Foundation is actually one of the ones that had funded a lot of the equity math programs that we're seeing come out. I mean, Bill Gates made his fortune off Microsoft. You would think that he would be someone who would be really into math being done correctly. I don't want my children being taught that showing their answer in math class is white supremacy culture. I really want my kids to know how to get the right answer. And I absolutely want my aerospace engineers to get the right answer. I don't care if they're green or purple. I want them to be really good at their jobs. But again, these foundations are pushing these initiatives, funding a lot of the nonprofits, and then pushing that, that toxicity and this kind of stew going forward. Number 6, data miners. This is something else. Again, there's a lot of money in school, and you think about kind of customers in education. Well, what's a product? Your child's opinions, your child's data, your child, how can we make your child a future customer? So we look at groups like Panorama Education, which was something that had come up again in the National School Boards Association scandal. This was a firm that was created by Merrick Garland's son-in-law. They work with hundreds of school districts across the country, pushing these surveys that we ask kids every day. Every child now has an iPad, so their kids get daily surveys. How do you feel about this? Parents actually have rights. There's something called the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment, where if your child is surveyed about 8 categories of things, like politics, drug usage, religion, et cetera, parents need to A, be informed, and then B, be able to opt out. A lot of districts are not aware that that is their legal obligation, and so they don't give parents the option to opt out of that. As all of this data is collected, let's bear in mind, these are not really sophisticated political operatives we're working with who know how to maintain data. These are people who are collecting stuff via open Google forms. On average, when I looked into this about 2 years ago, 2 school districts a day are hacked, right? There is all this sensitive information that's being gathered by schools and is then being used by Broward County in Miami last year. They had a ransomware attack where it was all the student information was being held and systems were being frozen, and millions of dollars were being demanded. So what is happening to all that information that's being gathered about our children? Social security numbers. Does mommy have a gun at home? Is mommy a Republican? Who has access to that? And how will that be used against you in the future? These are all things that should concern all of us. Because again, our children are these little valuable pockets of information. Number 7, journalists. Let's think about when we started in 2021, we almost all of the tips that we got in through our tip line were about race issues. And a lot of it was Ibram Kendi, Nicole Hannah-Jones, the 1619 Project. The 1619 Project in schools was pushed by the New York Times, the Pulitzer Foundation, right? And so that's kind of what we're up against. And so when you look at the New York Times, I mean, their coverage of the Orthodox schools in New York City, these are not impartial people. These are people who don't like parents making their own decisions about what their children should be learning because they don't agree that you think that you deserve a voice in that. But even beat reporters on the street, I mean, you think about NBC News, you think about the Washington Post, these former flagship, institutions in America, they're not good at what they do, right? The parents are the enemies. And that's something that breaks my heart when I talk to so many parents, is they think, well, like, a local reporter called me for my opinion and asked me why I felt this way or why I spoke up at this meeting. And I told them my opinion, and then they're demonized, right? They're mocked, they're doxxed, they're called the neighborhood QAnon person. And it's, again, they are activists and they are intending to chill people because, if Mary speaks up then and we drag her down in the press and everyone makes fun of her, then maybe it's going to scare Gail a little bit too. And we don't want that to happen, but that's the role that we see local media playing right now, which is really sickening. Another element of this, big medicine. I realize this is a group that's more focused on kind of like the civil rights thing and not the gender thing. So I'm just going to touch on this briefly, but an initiative that we see being pushed in a lot of schools right now is something called community schools. And this is wraparound healthcare services that are being promoted to make your lives easier. Gail, if we just have a medical clinic in the school, then you don't need to take time off from work to take your kid to the dentist. It's going to be so easy for you. These are targeted largely at low income communities. And again, it sounds really benign. Just, the kid, you can do your job and the kid can get the services they need. But actually what happens in states like California, where the medical age of consent is 12, or in Washington State, where the medical age of consent is 13, what's being offered is not just dental cleanings, it's a lot of other services too. Like we found in the La Cañada Mirada School District last year, the clinic actually was going to be run by Planned Parenthood. I dug into the contract. It was all medical records would be maintained by Planned Parenthood. Services that could not be provided in the school building children would be referred to an off-campus clinic, and parents would not have access to that information whatsoever. And so my 12-year-old could get various hormone therapies, could get an abortion, and I would not know about that. And so that's another program that's being pushed. We see districts that are partnering with gender clinics around the country, giving them advice on how to hide information from parents. We found one from St. Louis where the gender clinic had advised a teacher who said, all these girls that we've given chest binders to are passing out in gym class. Should we tell the parents? And the district said, and the gender clinic said, no, absolutely not. I mean, that's something, frankly, as a mother, I would love to know, because at that point, your child's bone structure is getting changed. But we as parents have been deemed to be enemies. And we have school districts that are making that decision that we are unsupportive based on their subjective opinion. Nikki's a Catholic. She should not, I think she probably wouldn't be supportive of her child's gender. So we don't have due process. They're just making these decisions for us. Number 9, politicians in the expert class. I think many of you might remember back in 2021 when Terry McAuliffe, when he was running for governor, said parents don't have a right to, decide what their children are learning. He's not, that was kind of just the mask slipping. There are far too many politicians in America up and down who really believe, no, this is the expert class. We know better than you do. The Michigan Democratic Party had a Facebook post last year where they said the role of public education is to teach a child what society needs them to know. That means they know, not you. And so again, that's where they come from. And you think about attorneys like Benjamin Crump that are, again, expert class. We have a lawsuit against him in New York right now because he believes that New York City's specialized school program is wrong because, it has the wrong races in it. There are too many Asians in the program. So we stepped in to defend that, the program, the New York City specialized school program, alongside the city and state of New York. So for a moment in time, we were on the same side of a case as de Blasio and Cuomo. You're apparently the last man standing. We want the program to be based on merit. And once you started to dig into the data, it actually turns out that there was a higher percentage of Asian students in the program who were at or below the poverty line than Hispanic students. So this is just families making different decisions based on their priorities. This is nothing about race. Crump's opinion, obviously, is that the way to fix this system is to inject race into every single portion of the system going forward, which we believe is both unethical as well as unconstitutional. Number 10, local governments and school boards. We have seen, Fairfax County is in the news perpetually. You guys hear it, you get it more than anything else. But how school boards have determined that you don't have a right to speak up. We see people whose microphones are cut off. There is only a limited amount of time for participation. In Loudoun County, where there was the big rape scandal in Virginia, they did a big investigation into what happened. They don't want the public to know that, right? Because they don't want to be embarrassed, but they want to keep you away from these things. A school district in Michigan last year had to pay out to a parent about $200,000 because they actually got her fired from her job because she spoke up at the school. And so these are the kinds of things that parents are facing when they try and engage with the system, which is appalling. Going up from there, state government. Again, you guys have it here, worse than anywhere my heart was at you. But I think about the New York State Board of Education, which just recently put out guidance instructing every school district in the state to hide gender information from parents. That's the State Board of Education. Here in California, you obviously have Tony Thurmond, who is trying to blackmail and bully districts, right? Cheetah Valley and everyone else. So you have that as as your cabinet official. The New York attorney or the New Jersey Attorney General recently sued 3 school districts because those school districts had the temerity to say, no, we actually think parents should know information about their kids' gender. So that's the AG. And then in California, right, your legislature, the bill that was just, I'm gonna say 538, 528. We're speaking up at a school board, a substantial disruption, right, which is, as we, largely, again, to chill parents from speaking up. That's your legislature stepping in. And so it's the executive branch, it's the judicial branch, and it's also the legislative branch at the state level that's causing problems. And finally, last, maybe not least, maybe worst, the federal government. At this moment in time, the federal government is a major player in these things. When the guys first brought the Harvard case, we had the Trump administration when it was working its way through the court. I guess not. At a point in time, we had the Trump people weigh in and say, yeah, no, we think that racial discrimination is a really bad thing. Boom, the administration changes, and then we have the Biden people say, no, this is actually a super awesome thing. I don't want that. No, that's bad. We had Merrick Garland's memo, like I said, directing the the FBI to intervene in school board issues. Just this week, actually, DOJ offered to mediate school board conflicts, right? They are not impartial mediators. To take a step back, Merrick Garland's memo on all these school board issues is actually still in effect because he never retracted, even though the reason that he did it, the National School Board Association memo, was retracted. So again, how could a DOJ agency be impartial when the boss has said you cannot be impartial? We have the CDC funding all these gender clinics, gender sexuality alliance clubs in school, these different programs, the community school programs. And so the federal government, even, thinking through to Title IX issues, they were trying to force schools to adopt their position on sexual orientation and gender identity by threatening to take away school lunch funding for districts that didn't toe the line with them. Literally taking money out of the mouths of poor children to blackmail districts into doing what they say. Again, think about the money and the power and the strings that go along with that. So that's kind of a dirty dozen. Again, I could go on for a lot longer, but I won't because, we could do some questions, but I know this is depressing, right? It feels like the weight of the world is against us. But the nice thing is it's not, because just in doing what I've done over the past 3 years of Parents Defending Education, it has been astonishing to watch the I don't know if any of you watched The Lord of the Rings. There's in the second one when they come over the mountain on the 3rd day. That's what it feels like. The cavalry is coming. And what is so exciting to me about this moment in time is the kinds of people and the volume of people who are coming out of the woodwork to step up for education is unlike anything I have seen before. I was in DC during the Tea Party watching people get off the sidelines and get all excited. But this kind of parent revolution right now is unlike anything else because it's not partisan. It's not race-based. Opposition to all this overreach and all this meddling in schools and messing with our kids spans racial lines. It spans political lines. Through our tip line, we have been receiving 50 to 200 tips a week since we launched from across the country. We have people who reach out to us and say, I'm a lifelong Democrat, but I really like this. I mean, probably 10% of the stuff we get in is from teachers who say, I don't like this stuff being shoved down my throat. And so, people are scared, right? We are still obviously at a moment in time where people are scared, they're vulnerable. At 99% of the tips we get in, people check that they want to be anonymous because they fear retaliation both against themselves as well as their kids. So we take the slings and arrows. I get the hate mail. No, I get the hate mail. It's fine. But we have found also the courage is contagious and people have realized, okay, well, if my neighbor stood at the school board meeting and she didn't drop dead, I can do it too, right? And so people are saying, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? I mean, looking around this room, this is astonishing that you have so many people here on a Saturday afternoon. It's like morning, afternoon, I guess I'm still on East Coast time. But it's, this is this moment in time where people have really realized the traditional gatekeepers in education have let us down. They never cared about our kids to start with. And so it's up to me because if I don't do it, no one else is going to do it. No one loves my children more than I do. No one loves my grandchildren more than me. Or, hey, I don't really want you spending my tax dollars this way, even if I don't have kids. And so this is, I think it's tremendously, it's tough, it's dark right now, but I think we are going to win because there are so many people with us. And so I'm going to leave you all with a homework assignment right now. As Frank alluded to in his opening remarks, there are all these people who are a lot of people who think they're alone. They're not alone. And so I think it is up to us over the next 2, 3, 4 years to really start to build capacity. I mean, I look at the conservative movement, kind of education activists, and so much of it has always been focused on Washington. It is not, right? COVID has shown us, if anything, where you live matters. You went during the pandemic from California to Florida. It was a tale of two cities, right? Your city matters, your state matters. And we have to get off the sidelines and engage at the local level, the school board level, the city council level. You know, it's not just Congress. And so we have to start to build those durable institutions and resilient people, because I'm watching parents burn out before my eyes, right? No one really likes getting the hate mail. No one likes their kid being ostracized from birthday parties. And so to start to and continue to build that bench and make sure that everyone has the skills that they need, the talking points, the infrastructure, the money, and the support, right? Just even the peer support, so that you know what, I've had a really tough week. I'm really pissed at my husband. I need to take a couple days off. If I lean out, I know that someone else is going to lean in. I think that's a really important thing. And so I'm so grateful for all of you for being here and for caring about this. I know I talk really fast. I'm sorry. It was a lot of stuff. I think we have probably like 5 minutes to push. But I look forward to answering anything again.
Thank you. Ms. Neily, one of my concerns is the idea of institutional capture. I'm sure you're aware of the Stanford Law School, the shenanigans that happened there with the now thankfully former DEI director who I believe chose to leave. This tells me that our judicial systems might be compromised because of this ideology that has made its way into there. Are we? A lot of what we seem to be relying on the pushback against critical social justice is our ability to throw lawsuits into play. Are you concerned that our litigation systems might be compromised?
Yes, I am. No, I was just talking, I live in Virginia with my husband, and I was like, look, Virginia's not going to stay kind of purplish forever, and the Fourth Circuit sucks. And he was like, what? And so I was like, I want to move somewhere else. And looking at the map, it's a weird thing to think about, okay, the California state government stuff, the Ninth Circuit is not going to have my back, right? And so there are pockets of the country where, what are you going to do? And we should be able to trust an impartial judiciary. And like you said, it's right now we have the courts. The courts are with us right now, but what will the courts look like in 10 years, in 15 years? I was just reading an interview with the guy who just is stepping down from demand justice, kind of the lefty corollary to a lot of the Federalist Society type things. And he said, wow, we are confirming judges at a breakneck pace. I think this is Biden's greatest achievement, right? And this is something that, I was astonished when I saw it. I was like, this is something I don't think a lot of people have been paying attention to because they have the Senate. And so, but then it's even before that, right? It's the law schools, it's the Stanford dean, it's that. And so, yeah, I think there is the institutional cap, the one kind of remaining institution, pillar is the courts. And you're right, we're not gonna have it forever. And that's why, to change the culture, right? There is, I think Andrew Breitbart, before he died, said politics is downstream from culture, right? It's still incumbent on all of us to fight these fights in a daily, in our day-to-day life to start to change things. My husband works at Cato. He's far more libertarian than I am. And he went to the Aspen Ideas Festival a few weeks ago, and he was like, you should come. He's like, I think everyone would secretly agree with you. I was like, yeah, but it's really kind of exhausting, that person who everyone comes up to and whispers, like you. I saw a meme the other day, and it was someone who's being burned at the stake, and the guy who was lighting the pyre said, I agree with you. I was like, that's what my life is like on a daily basis. It's exhausting. Right. And so we have to I think there is a tipping point though. And I think in particular on the gender issue is where we have seen people who are they're kind of comfortable breaking with their tribe and breaking with a pack and be like, no, I don't really want my daughter to play soccer against it like a guy. I saw that video of the woman who had the volleyball spiked in her face by a guy. And her face it was horrible. And I think so people are starting to realize, okay, I can break from my tribe and the world is not going to collapse. And so the institutional capital worries me, but I think it is, I don't know, I have to stay optimistic.
Nicole. Yeah, yes, we support you. I enjoyed your talk. If I can call you Nicole. When this is over.
My mom calls me Nicole when I'm in trouble.
Okay, gotcha. So when this is over, I want to email you a Substack essay I just wrote. It's called, I Need People Who Look Like Me. No, you don't. You really don't. I remember the old days before I grew wiser, debating Gail Harriet, who's here, about Proposition 209. And I was strongly in favor of affirmative action based on race at that time. And I wouldn't listen to Gail. And now, after a few decades, I've turned the corner. I've seen the light. And let me tell you why. Let me tell you why. I could talk all day, but I'm not going to, but 3 points. One, I have a son who's very smart. He's very smart. And he was applying to college. And he applied to a very prominent Ivy League school. And we were all very impressed and happy for him. And I looked at the stats, and I noticed that my son, although he was certainly in the kill zone for competitiveness at this school, in terms of his GPA, my son was a football player, a jockey, loved to play around in high school. His grades were probably at the absolute bottom of the class. And I thought to myself, what kind of experience is he going to have in college? And so instead, he chose another place where he was probably ranked at the 95th percentile in terms of competitive. He had a wonderful time. He was like the big man on campus. He formed this organization, that organization. He had confidence, he had self-esteem. He was ready to conquer the world when he left college. I don't think that would have been the case if he had chose the first school. Number two, I had a conversation with a relative, and we were talking about Blackness, and my relative said to me, April 21st, 2018, a date that will live in infamy. She said to me, Blackness is oppression. Nothing else matters. And I thought to myself, good God, where have we come to? This person who said this to me is the descendant of Ivy League graduates. She's probably a fourth or fifth generation college student. This is a person who has great-grandparents who had summer homes. She has an ancestor who was Speaker of the US House of Representatives on a pro forma basis in 1875. This is someone who's had her entire experience in private schools, and yet she believed Blackness is suppression, nothing else matters, and that's how I should think of myself. So corrosive, so bad, so bad. None of us are avatars for our race. If there are over 40 million Black Americans, guess what? There are 40 million life stories, perspectives, and experiences, and that needs to be hammered home. There's no one racial story that fits all sizes. We grow in wisdom when we see the individual, first and foremost, before we see the racial group. None of us are avatars for our race, and that's all I gotta say.
Thank you.
I love that. I talked to the New York Times earlier this year because we have been filing a lot of Office of Civil Rights complaints against these racially segregated affinity groups or healing circles or whatever they call it. And this woman said, why are you doing this? And she assumed I was some MAGA troll. I said, because I really believe that people should be treated as individuals and not members of ethnic groups. My grandparents on my father's side met in Manzanar. They met in an internment camp in California. They were American citizens, both born in California. And while they were in the camps, my grandfather's family, super patriotic. They all enlisted in the 442nd. My grandfather was a transit over MacArthur. They loved this country. My great-grandfather, who was born in Japan, was not eligible for citizenship, applied 4 times to go and fight in the army. He was not eligible to do so. He was one of the first people after the 1952 court case that allowed Americans born abroad of Asian descent to become citizens. He was one of the first people in line. He loved America. My grandmother's family refused to sign the loyalty oath. They were so pissed off. They hated America. My great uncle was a troublemaker. He was sent to he was kept in a camp in New Mexico until 1946, like well after the war's end. They were stripped of their citizenships and sent back to Japan on Christmas Day, 1945. For my grandmother to marry my grandfather in Japan, she had to go through a court case in LA to have her citizenship reinstated. That's the diversity that exists in one family. And so to be like, you have yellow skin, this is how you think, is such a slap in the face to me. So on the day of the Supreme Court decision, when Ed was inside, I was outside with my kids, with my 8-year-old and my 9-year-old. And we were walking around and all the activists on the day, because it was a Monday, everyone on our side actually was working, everyone on their side is a paid activist. They came up to us because we're Asian, and they tried to give us the bandanas and the stuff, and I was like, no, we're on the other side of this issue. And my kids are like, what's going on? I was like, well, those people think that you should be treated differently based on your skin color. What do you think about that? They're like, that's stupid. I was like, I think it's stupid too. Look how simple this is, right? This is, in the eyes of a child, it's a lot easier than someone with all these political layers and kind of societal expectations pushed on them. And I mean, that, I think you nailed it in the head, right? This is, demographics are not destiny. Are we out of time?